Hi, I'm Ravi. I'm a longtime practitioner of the spiritual path, and today I want to share some insights about spirituality. So the topic for today is how to be spiritual without meditating. And so it might be a shocking title because we associate spirituality and meditation so closely um, in this era. And to defuse that a little bit already off the bat, I want to say that I'm not against the idea of meditating. I meditate almost every day, and I have done so for years. But the reason why I wanted to share this is because I think meditation is actually not the way I made most of my spiritual progress. And there have been years of my spiritual life where I didn't really meditate and I was still making spiritual progress. And, some years of those earlier years when I wasn't meditating, I feel that I've made more spiritual progress than other years where I was meditating. So I think there's a variety of reasons why meditation has become so prominent in spiritual discourse in this era. And I think one of the reasons is because it's a kind of secular practice that's doesn't require any dogma, is associated with direct experience, um, and it's accessible to anybody. Um, so I think there's a powerful reason why in our era where we don't want to be bound by religious dogmas and things like that, why there's this appeal of this idea of, you can just sit there without any gadgets or tools or scriptures and just directly make contact with the inner consciousness. And that's a really powerful idea, and I don't want to take that power away. But there's also certain contraindications to meditation, which I think are also uh, valuable to think about. Um, for one reason is just because certain people have a personality type that's not really necessarily suited to meditation. Some people are very, active, or some people are very emotional, and different sorts of spiritual practices will actually suit them better than just sitting in one single position for hours and hours and trying to do meditation. And I think that should be honored with by letting them follow the spiritual practice that's most suited to their nature, and acknowledging that it's not just meditation, but if you follow any path to its highest potentiality that leads you to the divine or to whatever notion of the absolute you might be seeking. It's not that only meditation can lead you there. I think the meditative path, again, going back to this idea that it doesn't require any dogmas or scriptures, while some of these other paths like bhakti or emotional yoga or karma yoga require a little bit more metaphysical justification for how they can lead you to the highest goal, whereas meditation is more, I think it suits the knowledge-based tendencies of our era better. But all these other practices and paths, if you're seriously on the spiritual path, it's worth considering them because they can also lead you there. Another indication of why you might not want to meditate as much as practicing other spiritual paths is that at different points on our path, um, we're just drawn to different practices. And I think shoehorning everybody into this one rigid practice, it doesn't reflect the kind of diversity of experience and consciousness and possibilities of life and spiritual life. Um, there are just many different motions that consciousness can make, and again, all of the little different diversions and differences that consciousness can make, if they're followed to their utmost capacity, can lead you to the same path or equivalent realizations to meditation. Another reason why I think the meditative path is not the only one to consider is the ideal of integrality or integral spiritual practice. Um, so, integral spiritual practice is the idea that one's whole life needs to become a spiritual practice, and we don't just reserve spiritual practice to a couple of hours when we're secluded in our room, but we make our entire life an expression of spirituality and of divinity. And that, depending on your interpretation, this is a little bit of a newer ideal. I follow the spiritual path of Sri Aurobindo and the mother um, who taught that rather than renouncing the world, you should embrace the world in an integral yoga. But there have been a variety of other teachers that are not affiliated with Sri Aurobindo that have embraced this idea as well. especially Ken Wilber and his integral school of psychology and different Buddhist schools associated with Ken Wilber have also been embracing this integral kind of ideal. So it's an ideal that's becoming more and more common in spiritual practice in the modern world. And so why I say that this is less there's less emphasis on meditation is because uh, you can meditate all day if you're in a monastery or if you're secluded in a forest, but if you're engaged with life, the daily tasks of life, it's it's less common that you'll be able to spend hours and hours and hours in meditation. And so the integral ideal is kind of associated more with practices that let you be uh, connect with spirituality outside the meditation room. So not to say that if you're integral spiritual practitioner, you won't meditate a lot, because there are many integral spiritual practitioners who do take, the hours of meditation seriously. But at least I've noticed in with peers from the Sri Aurobindo scene that there's less of an emphasis in the Sri Aurobindo world on meditation than there is in other schools that are more heavily associated with the renunciative ideal, which isn't to say that, again, people in the Sri Aurobindo scene do place value on meditation, but it's not seen as the absolute pinnacle of spiritual experience or spiritual practice. It's just one practice among many. Um, and so again, I want to affirm the value of meditation. I think it's highly likely that at some point in one's spiritual journey, one will find meditation useful. Just, but I think, yeah, at the same time, there's this variety of other consciousness practices that are also useful, and I want to raise awareness of those. And say that, if you're not necessarily feeling called to spend an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours on the meditation couch, there are these variety of ways that you can incorporate spirituality into the rest of your day that also give you uh, a great spiritual grounding without needing to kind of sit in one rigid posture and concentrate your consciousness in a very specific way. So with that, I'll go into 5 practices that are again not that you can do outside the meditation couch that lead to a great sense of spiritual opening. And the first one is a practice of offering. So offering is a practice that goes back quite far to at least as far back as the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna mentions it as a practice to Arjuna. And this is a practice where you take whatever content of your consciousness, um, so whatever action or thought or deed or yeah, anything that you can kind of fix your mind on that is part of your being or consciousness, and have a sense that you're offering it to the divine, that you're giving it as a gift freely. Um, so one way of thinking of this is by analogy. So in ancient times, they had temple sacrifices where you'd donate a certain amount of wealth or cattle or some other valuable item to the temple. And that signified that you're giving something that's valuable to you and you're offering that to the institution that represents divinity. Um, and so in that context, what is given, it can't be given with a sense of resentment. It has to be given with a sense of generosity and love towards that entity, which is represents the highest possible value, which is the divine or God. So you make that offering of what is valuable to you, the gold or cattle, with that sense that I'm offering something that I care about to something that I care about even more because this is what I want to give to you as a gift with a sense of generosity. Um, so by analogy with this practice of sacrifice where you give physical items to the temple, we take an analogy and give now we're doing that same process of offering, but now it's with the contents of our consciousness, and we're not giving it to a temple or a priest, but to the divine, him or herself. So, for example, and it you can give anything to the divine, and they will accept it graciously. So, one example is let's say you're eating breakfast, you could, with a sense of gratitude, say, thank you for this bowl of oatmeal, and give a sense of offering to the divine that you're offering this oatmeal in the spirit that it will nourish you and bring positivity into your life. And um, yeah, so bring bring a sense of well-being into your life and into everything that surrounds you. So you offer the oatmeal, you offer the act of eating the oatmeal, the sense of digestion. And so there's a number of ways you can kind of conceptualize it. But the main motion is this sense that you're giving, like you're giving a gift to the divine. So the same feeling that you'd have when you're giving a gift to a loved one, you want to make that same motion inside yourself with that content of consciousness that you've kind of delimited with saying, this is the oatmeal that I give. Then you can do the same with any action. Like let's say you're filling out your taxes, which is coming up for us in the United States. So this is kind of usually a kind of difficult, slightly unpleasant task for most of us. But at the end of it, we can say, I offer this this unit of exertion and labor that I had to do to maintain the upkeep of society and my own life, and I offer it to the divine. So you can offer an action to the divine. You can offer um, even a simple daily acts like bathing, just compartmentalize in your mind and offer that action. So eventually you can get to a place where every single action in your day is kind of offered up as a sacrifice to the divine, and you can get to the point where you see your whole life as this offering that is given to the divine. Um, and so this by doing this continuously, you get to a state where you see your whole life as kind of this sacred thing that is being given over. And yeah, it's the sense of sacredness, of generosity, of surrender to that greater power that you want to be living into. So that's the first practice, the practice of offering. The second practice that I would suggest is the practice of sincerity. So this is a practice that is not talked about much. Mira Alfasa, or who is called the mother in the Sri Aurobindo community, talked often about it though. And this is the idea that if you look inside your consciousness, there's always a slight deceptiveness or crookedness that's kind of inherent in human nature, that we always have these kind of ulterior motives. Um, that kind of creep into whatever we're doing, whether that be the relation to God or to our fellow humans. We might say that, I'm going to do this nice thing for you, but I'll secretly expect something in return. The practice of sincerity is the attempt to kind of iron out this crookedness and just do what you say you're going to do and do what you do with that sense that there is no sort of ulterior motive, but you're just doing something with uh, the pure intention of the most sincere thing that you could do. So usually the way we encounter this word sincerely in this modern day and age is at the end of a letter. So when you write sincerely, you say you give the letter and you say sincerely your name. Um, so if you have the sense that you're kind of have an ulterior motive in your letter, then you're not really being sincere. But if you just write your the purity of your intention and uh your feeling in that letter, then you can honestly put the word sincere when you sign that letter. So it's difficult to be in this 100% of the time. Mira Alfasa said, if you're really honest with yourself, it's difficult to be sincere even for 1 or 2 minutes of your day. But the practice of trying to be sincere, it really purifies your consciousness in a way that is very spiritually beneficial. Um, so yeah, you can practice that pretty much in any situation throughout your day. If you're interacting with people, try to be sincere with them. That doesn't mean that you need to be naively trusting or naively revealing about of yourself or any of these things. We still can practice with a sense of boundaries and a sense of good judgment. But it means that we're not secretly having these kind of ulterior motives creep into our dealings with people. So yeah, you can practice it when dealing with people, or you can practice it on your own when you're reflecting to yourself about your day, or you can practice it in prayer, in communion and communication with the divine when you're speaking with them. Speak about your honest feelings and intentions, um, and speak freely about your aspirations as well. So that's the second practice I'd suggest, sincerity. The third practice is the practice of surrender. And this again is one that kind of like the first two, offering and sincerity, it relies on this conception of a kind of uh, first and second person attitude towards the divine. So when you surrender, um, by this practice, we mean you surrender to the will of the divine. Or you can think of it as to the will of the soul, which is identical with the divine. Um, so again, when we think of the ego, like with sincerity, there's a certain crookedness that the ego introduces into our dealings with the world. The ego seeks its own benefit. It seeks to take more than its share. It seeks to dominate. But when we surrender to the divine will, we let the sense that this thing that is greater, we will allow it to determine uh, our actions and our consequences in life, without letting this ego, which seeks for its own benefit, to interpose between ourselves and the world. Um, so this is a really powerful practice. I used to practice it at the end of the day before going to sleep, as well as intermittently throughout the day. But I found it really powerful, just to completely surrender myself to the will of the divine. And I had a few years where uh, things were feeling very difficult, and it was feeling difficult for me to even meditate. Like I was saying earlier, there were a couple of years where I was not meditating that much. Um, just because my life felt so uncertain and I didn't feel like I had enough grounding to even sit down and say, I'm going to do this for a period of time because I think it'll make my life better, or bring me closer to the divine. But I could say, I relinquish all my intentions and I just surrender to the divine will. Whatever your will is, I trust in it. And just to get into that space for a couple of moments during the day, that felt really powerful and really beneficial to my consciousness. Um, so now that I look back on it, I know that I grew a lot through that practice. And I think ultimately it was probably more beneficial for me to do that for a couple of minutes than to try to force myself to sit and meditate for 30 minutes, which might not have made that much of a dent in the rest of my consciousness. So I think it's a really powerful practice. And it doesn't just have to be at the end of the day, it can be throughout the day, just checking back in and surrendering back to that sense of the divine, what the divine will is. So that raises the question, how do you know what to surrender to? And I think you need to have some initial sense of what that is, of what the divine will feels like, or what your soul feels like, in order to surrender to it, because otherwise you're just in this catch-22 of not knowing. So it's good if there's some other vibration that you can kind of tune into and know that that's what you're surrendering to. Um, so again, during this period, I was reading Sri Aurobindo's poetic work, Savitri, a lot. And to me, that brings you really directly in consciousness, into contact with the divine consciousness, the vibration of the supreme being, which is really in the words. So it's like I have attuned myself to the vibration of the supreme by reading this poetic work, and then I kind of surrender to that vibration when I was doing my practice of surrender. So it worked in tandem. But if not that, then there might be some other guru figure that you admire, that you feel has the vibration of the divine, or maybe people like to work with crystals or different energies that help them tune into that divine feeling. And you just want to surrender your ego, your own intentions, anything that's getting in the way of saying, I let this greater will take control of my life, and I will do what is seen as best according to that will, without letting my own desires and egoic projections get in the way of that. So the fourth practice I suggest is equality or equanimity. Um, and this is another practice that Sri Aurobindo talks a lot about in the synthesis of yoga. He goes into it in multiple sections. Um, So it's not just important in the section about the yoga of work, but it's prominent in the section where he goes into his own innovative yogic practices. Even for the most advanced practices in the book, he still talks about this equality as kind of the basis of them. Um, so that is the way of understanding this is we see the divine as being this kind of massive energy that underlies the outpouring of manifestation and form that is in the manifested world. But behind that, there's this deep, deep and absolute peace that lies behind it. So kind of like the massive peace of the depths of the ocean underneath the waves of the manifestation. So that is the quality that the divine has. So if we're aspiring to be like the divine, we can aspire to be like that in a part, excuse me, a part of our consciousness. So that means deeply not blunting the reactions of the surface. So we're not saying that I'm going to take this anger or fear or depression and try to shove it out of my consciousness, but just trying to get in contact with this deeper equality that lies below it. Even if these surface things are playing out, I'm not going to reject them. I'm not going to say that, I can't feel them, but I am going to kind of get in touch with this deeper layer of myself that lies beyond it. Um, so I I practiced this a lot at one of my jobs that I had that I found stressful at times, but was ultimately uh, it was a mixed experience, but I learned a lot, and yeah, through the stresses of the job, I found myself needing to center in myself to find this sense of equality and peace. And then people started to notice, and they said, "Wow, you're so zen." And I felt, no, I'm not. I'm not zen. I feel all these stresses and um, difficulties all the time. I feel like I'm always encountering these problems. But then I realized it must have been because I'm at the same time as I'm feeling this stress and this these problems, I'm also cultivating this deeper aspect of calm and getting in touch with this equality um, at a deeper level of myself. So like with the other practices, this can go all the way up to the supreme quality of being um, equal to everything. If you are able to practice this in its highest form, you're at one with the divine. So it's as worth cultivating as anything else. Um, so arguably, this is actually kind of common. This is similar to certain forms of meditation you might do in a seated way. You could do this meditation of being equal to all events and to all happenings and to all contents of your consciousness if you're just sitting in meditation. But I bring this up as a non-meditative practice because you can especially do it while you're doing the activities of your daily life. So while you're at dinner with your family, or while you're at your job, or while you're doing whatever else it is that you need to do during your day, you can cultivate this sense of equality to whatever events, good events and bad events. We need to be equal to both of them while feeling the full value of those events in integral practice, um, being finding that deeper layer of yourself that is in touch with the kind of absolute peace of the divine is what we mean by developing a capacity for equality. So the fifth and last practice I want to talk about today is the practice of karma yoga. So Karma Yoga is the practice of work, the practice of spiritual work, where you take your work as the practice that you raise to the quality of divinity. Um, so it can be thought of as actually kind of a subset of the practice of offering, because what you do in work is you take the work that you're doing and offer it to the divine. So if you take an action of work like filling out a spreadsheet for your job, you can do that active work and say, I offer this action of work to the divine for the benefit of the company that I work for, the client that I work for, and seeing that client as um, one manifestation of the divine for their benefit. I offer this active service of work. Um, but so it's not just the final act of offering in the work, but actually doing the energy uh, transfer of the work itself that also goes into it. So that's why it's a little bit more than just offering. So you can offer the final act of the spreadsheet, but also while you're filling out the spreadsheet, feel that sense of energy pouring out of you as you fill in the cells and do the formulas. And maybe send an email to your colleague about what's in row F4 or whatever. As you're doing that, feel the energy coursing out of you, and know that that is spiritual energy. It's not just psychological um, uh, energy that drains you, but it's the energy of Shakti, the divine energy that goes into forcefully animating the manifestation of the universe. So when we do work, we pour out this Shakti energy, and it transforms the outer world um, in alignment with what the divine wants. So by doing this work, we're carrying out the divine will. In the practice of surrender, we were talking about how we surrender to the divine will. In Karma Yoga, we act as active agents of the divine will. So the divine wills something, we carry it out by propelling our Shakti energy, transforming the world in line with what the divine wants, and then we offer that final action as saying that, I offer this action for the benefit of all people, or for the benefit of this client who represents all beings. Um, and so in Karma Yoga, we can get to a wonderful sense of being the agent of the divine will. So feeling what it's like to be um, kind of the active instrument of the divine, which is all realizations of the divine are equal in the sense that they're um, uh, equally saturated with the divine being and the divine presence, but at the same time, they can be different realizations. So the realization that you have in meditation, it's a different feeling and a different quality of consciousness than you contact than when you're being the agent of the divine in Karma Yoga. So that's one reason to explore it. It's just a different kind of fun or interesting or blissful even experience to be the agent of the divine in Karma Yoga, and that's why it's good to do it. So the more you can feel yourself pouring spiritual energy into your work and offering it to the divine, the greater your sense of being the agent of the divine will come about, and the greater bliss you will feel as you come into more and more contact with the divine. So it's um, just as meditation brings you into contact with the static divine, or the immobile aspect of the divine, Karma Yoga brings you into contact with the active or dynamic principle of the divine that is in motion and in manifestation. So those are the five practices I'd suggest for those who want to explore spiritual practice outside of meditation. So there's offering, sincerity, surrender, equality, and karma yoga. Um, Again, this is not ultimately to knock meditation, despite the title of the video. It's just to offer an expanded perspective on all spiritual practices, and how we can view spiritual practice without seeing everything as only meditation, as the practice that we have to shoehorn our entire spirituality into, because consciousness is diverse, spirituality is diverse, and there's all these different possibilities for of consciousness to explore beyond seated meditation. So yeah, I hope this is useful and enlightening. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and tune back in next week for more videos. Thanks.